At the catastrophic Battle of Fulford, 1066, the forgotten prelude to the Norman Conquest that cleared the path for the Battle of Hastings, Earl Morcar watches 5,000 Northumbrian infantry break against Norwegian invaders near York. Yet, the Germany Beck post-battle iron recycling horde proves this Norse victory was rapidly reversed. Invaders leave behind a massive horde of weapon-grade iron billets they recycled on the battlefield, frozen by their sudden slaughter at Stamford Bridge 5 days later. Doom arrives now, and there is absolutely no escape. Within months, the sudden death of King Edward the Confessor plunges the early English kingdoms into a brutal tripartite succession crisis, while a Norman duke across the Channel sharpens his own claim to the throne. The Scandinavian world watches with predatory intent. King Harald Hardrada of Norway unleashes 300 longships, carrying 10,000 veteran warriors toward the northern shires. This overwhelming force holds an immense numerical advantage against the decentralized defenders. The fleet anchors at Recall, establishing a structural advantage that makes open combat completely unavoidable. The arrival of the massive Viking armada forces an immediate, high-stakes choice. Earl Morcar of Northumbria abandons his defenses to march directly toward the invaders. He refuses to endure a siege within the decaying Roman fortification of York. He believes that a rapid, aggressive strike will shatter the Viking vanguard before the full weight of the Norwegian army can fully deploy. This bold movement leaves the safety of the base far behind. Morcar risks everything on a single roll of the dice. A column of iron-scaled riders' silhouettes against a grey, damp northern sky as the standard snaps in the cold river breeze. King Harald Hardrada monitors the battlefield from his high ground, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash his elite riverside reserves. The wet crunch of marching boots echoes through the freezing mud as thousands of Norse axes sway in rhythm. The English do not see the veterans lurking in the dead ground of the low flats. This hidden deployment creates a lethal asymmetry. Hardrada assumes the English earls will cower behind the ancient walls of York, allowing him to bypass them entirely. They do not cower. Instead, Morcar unleashes a cohesive, well-drilled corps of personal housecarls, armed with deadly two-handed Danish axes capable of shearing through iron mail. These elite soldiers possess terrifying combat capability, trained to shatter shield walls with a single blow. The dramatic irony is now armed, yet neither commander realizes the true danger as the armies converge. A single command will spark the slaughter. The receding tide inside Germany, Beck signals the moment of absolute commitment. Earls Edwin and Morcar refuse to hesitate any longer. A regional chronicle records that the young leaders commit their entire field army to an assault across the muddy stream bed. They order the front ranks to lock shields and prepare for a rapid advance. This decisive movement seals the trajectory of the entire campaign. There is no turning back from this muddy ditch. The narrow corridor between the tidal river Ouse and the swampy Heslington marshes measures less than 600 meters wide. This restricted terrain acts as a natural choke point, leaving no room for tactical maneuvering. The deep channel of Germany Beck cuts directly across the path, acting as a natural ditch that traps the advancing English. Hardrada's veteran forces hold the solid high ground, forcing the attackers through a treacherous, boggy bottleneck. The terrain becomes a weapon. This geography paralyzes any hope of a quick breakthrough. Earl Edwin deploys his Mercian forces on the river flank, while Morcar's Northumbrians occupy the treacherous marsh side. Opposite them, Tostig Godwinson stands on the landward flank with Flemish mercenaries and less experienced allies from Orkney. Hardrada deliberately hides his finest veterans behind the alluvial embankments of the Ouse to obscure his true numbers. 6,000 Vikings lock their painted shields in a dense, tight wall of iron and ash. The sudden silence before the clash grows suffocating. Within minutes, the first flight of tanned arrows, loosed from ashwood bows, rattles like dry reeds through the sky. Morcar's housecarls surge across the receded mud of the Beck, crashing violently into Tostig's lines. The initial English charge pushes the Vikings back, but the apparent success instantly fractures Morcar's own shield wall. By pursuing the enemy into the boggy Heslington marshes, the English plan fails completely as their line overextends. They stand isolated, exposed, and entirely vulnerable. This fatal separation destroys their tactical cohesion. The sudden blast of Hardrada's war horn signals the ultimate point of no return. The Battle of Fulford, 1066, fully ignites as elite Varangian veterans surge across the riverbank delta. The grand Scandinavian threat to the crown of England, with the Norman Conquest now inevitable, reaches its peak. Morcar refuses to retreat, committing his remaining housecarls to the melee despite the absolute collapse of his outer perimeter. That mysterious, improbable battlefield recycling horde is set in motion right here. Their heavy iron ringmail offers no protection. Iron axes cleave through that very ringmail as Hardrada executes a brilliant tactical wheeling maneuver to exploit the broken line. The elite Norwegian housecarls turn sharply eastward, sweeping directly across the dry ground. Simeon Durham preserves the horror of this moment, describing the scale of slaughter. The air turns freezing as the sound of splintering limewood rims echoes through the ranks. Heavy shields slam together amidst the desperate movement of retreating men. The collision leaves the riverbank littered with broken shields. Broken shields offer no protection to Edwin, who believes his Mercian soldiers can safely retreat along the muddy banks toward York. They cannot escape swift pursuit. The Norwegian charge completely shatters the river wing, forcing panicked birdmen into the deep currents of the tidal Ouse. Men drown in the freezing, fast-flowing waters as the defense collapses entirely. Morcar remains completely blind to this disaster, continuing his isolated advance deeper into the eastern swamp. The cold rising tide seals their fate. That cold rising tide turns crimson as the black alluvial silt of Germany Beck swallows the rear ranks. Earl Morcar realizes his fatal isolation too late to reform his thinned lines. Squeezed relentlessly into the deep marshes, he refuses to surrender, shouting desperate orders to maintain a stand against the tightening vice. Hardrada's forces strike from the rear while Tostig rallies the front. This immense tactical pressure forces a final desperate struggle for survival. The resistance leaves broken axes in the mud. Those broken axes mark the complete disintegration of the Northumbrian shield wall, proving the battle is mathematically irreversible. Morcar's organized resistance shatters entirely under the synchronized two-front assault. The fatal assumption that the English would remain safely behind York's stone walls dissolves into a brutal open-field triumph for the invaders. Outnumbered and physically exhausted, the defenders break their ranks, fleeing wildly into the surrounding morass. The victorious Norwegians immediately begin their relentless pursuit. A scene of absolute devastation unfolds across the wetlands. Within hours, the horrific carnage transforms the peaceful northern landscape into a massive, silent graveyard. Snorri Sturluson's saga preserves a brutal detail, reporting that the English dead lay so thickly in the swampy ditches that the pursuing Norsemen march across the morass dry-shod on the bodies. The victorious invaders immediately strip the fallen soldiers, gathering shattered weapons and iron mail for localized battlefield reprocessing. A terrifying silence descends upon Germany Beck. The true cost of this defeat remains unmeasured. The total annihilation of the Northern Army leaves York completely defenseless, forcing the city's immediate political submission. Hardrada demands 150 high-status hostages to guarantee absolute loyalty. This catastrophic military collapse reverberates southward, shattering the kingdom's defensive capabilities and directly accelerating the timeline of the Norman Conquest. The entire administrative apparatus of the North crumbles in a single afternoon. This sudden vacuum leaves the English crown dangerously exposed. Organized regional resistance disappears entirely. King Harald II believes his southern coastal defenses can securely protect the realm from imminent invasion. He is completely wrong about the primary threat. News of the devastating Battle of Fulford, 1066, forces the monarch to abandon the south completely, initiating an unprecedented 190-mile forced march northward. The southern coast now lies utterly exposed to the Norman Conquest, the invasion that will climax at the Battle of Hastings. This fatal distraction seals the doom of the kingdom. So why is the Battle of Fulford, 1066, the forgotten conflict that broke the north and made the Battle of Hastings possible, almost completely erased from English history? Archaeological records uncover a specific detail, exposing a massive hoard of raw iron forging billets abandoned beside charcoal hearths. The sudden slaughter of the Norwegian victors just 5 days later buried these field smithies beneath the tidal silt for a millennium. This catastrophic engagement neutralized Anglo-Saxon England, leaving the kingdom defenseless against the Norman Conquest. Within days, the strategic landscape shifts permanently as the true legacy of the Battle of Fulford, 1066, becomes clear. The complete decimation of the northern forces leaves King Harald II fatally weakened, stripping him of the vital housecarls needed to sustain a prolonged defense of the realm. The blood soaked into the soil of Germany, Beck seals the destruction of the Anglo-Saxon state. This forgotten conflict remains the fatal wound that made the Norman Conquest and the Battle of Hastings inevitable. Earls Edwin and Morcar survived the slaughter only to face absolute political neutralization under the new Norman regime. The next collision would come at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where Harold seeks vengeance against the Norse invaders. The epic campaign continues immediately with the bloody showdown at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Subscribe to stay with this series. The next engagement is already in production. If you are watching on a television screen, the QR code on screen now will take you directly to the subscribe button on your phone.